Hey everybody, we're back for another 2021-2022 season preview, and today we're going to be looking at a team that is one of the biggest contenders in the Eastern Conference. They've gone to back-to-back conference finals, and they spent a lot of time this offseason and money just trying to keep the gang together rather than going out and making a ton of changes. They've been a contender for the last few years. Is this finally going to be the year where they can break through and get to the finals and possibly win a cup? We're going to find out here over the next few months. But it, of course, is the New York Islanders. And before we get into it, I just ask that you please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It helps out so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get into it. And before we look forward, we need to look back. Last season was another very strong year for the Islanders. They did tail off at the end of the regular season and dropped all the way down to fourth in the East, but as soon as it got to playoff time, the Islanders were back, and they were able to go all the way to the Final Four. Unfortunately, they did lose to Tampa Bay, and they were one win away from making the finals, but just came up a little short. They went 32-17-7 last year, 71 points. Like I said, fourth place in the East, but turned it on come playoff time and were able to make another deep run. Offensively, well, they're the Islanders. We know they're not going to score a ton of goals. They're pretty average offense, slightly below average, 2.71 goals for per game last year. They're not a high-scoring team. That's not what they're known for. That's not the way that they're built. Where they really shine is on the defensive side of the ice, and once again, the Islanders were one of the absolute best defensive teams in the NHL again last season, giving up just 2.23 goals against per game. Phenomenal numbers there, and that's how they win. They win low-scoring, close games, and they're experts at keeping the puck out of their own net, and that's what the Islanders do. Power play was okay, not great, 18.8% on the power play. Very middle of the road there, nothing really to write home about, but their penalty kill was pretty good, darn good, really good actually, 83.7% on the penalty kill. Goes right along with their defensive game as a whole. They are much better at keeping the puck out of their own net than putting it in the opponent's net. They're not a super high-scoring team, but they are incredibly good defensively. So this offseason, there's been a few moves for the Islanders, but really not a whole lot. Most of their money and focus this offseason has been re-signings and keeping guys in New York and keeping the band together. So there hasn't been a whole lot of roster turnover, and that makes a lot of sense. Why would they want a lot of roster turnover and a lot of changes when they've been to the Final Four the past two seasons and they were one win away from the Stanley Cup Finals last year? There's no reason to make a lot of changes if you're the Islanders. This group is winning, and this group is making you a full-on contender for the Stanley Cup. You might as well try and keep this group together. So that was most of what they did this offseason. There were some changes, though. Jordan Eberle was definitely their biggest loss, and he was taken in the expansion draft by Seattle. So losing Eberle is definitely going to be a little bit of a hit, especially to their offense, but they've got some young guys that might be able to step up into a bigger offensive role and replace those lost goals there. They also had to trade away defenseman Nick Leddy for salary cap reasons. So Leddy is now in Detroit, and definitely a top four guy gone off the back end. Now they still do have a strong defense core, but Leddy not being there, at least offensively, is certainly going to have an impact on this team. Forward Travis Zajac retired. He was a deadline acquisition last year and played a third-line role for them. And then depth defenseman Braden Coburn and failed first-round pick Michael Del Cole were not re-signed. On the addition side of things, Zach Parise got signed coming over from Minnesota after he was bought out by the Wild. I don't expect him to play a huge role with the Islanders, but if he can get back to at least being like a 40-point guy, if he has 40 points this year, I think the Islanders will be happy. And we'll see what he's able to do in a new uniform after spending, almost a decade with Minnesota. They also signed defenseman Zdeno Chara, the veteran D-man, obviously played with Washington last year, was a free agent yet again, and he signs with the Isles. And after losing Leddy, they kind of needed another guy on that D-core. Otherwise, they were going to be playing like Sebastian Aho or Thomas Hickey or someone like that. So they needed another defenseman. Chara, obviously not what he used to be, but still in a penalty-killing role and a defensive role, and he can still be a fine bottom pair guy, and that's looking like what he's going to be for the Islanders. Forward Richard Panik came over from Detroit in the Nick Leddy deal, so he'll be a depth forward for this team, but that's just some more forward depth added to this group. And defenseman Paul Ledoux was signed. I'm looking at him to be like a 7th or 8th defenseman for this team. We'll see where it shakes out. I don't think he's going to be in the lineup on a regular basis, but add some more defense depth to this group. And that's pretty much, that's really the only changes they've made. Everything else was re-signings. Guys like Palmieri and Cizikas and Pelech and whatnot. So they've had to re-sign quite a few guys. Beauvillier, Sorokin. They had a lot of re-signings to do. But as far as actual changes to the roster, there weren't a whole lot. And now it is time to look at my projected roster for this season for the New York Islanders. And we'll take a look here. Forward group, obviously, Matthew Barzal, Anders Lee returning from his knee injury, Brock Nelson, Josh Bailey, Anthony Beauvillier, Kyle Palmieri, J.G. Pageau, Zach Parise coming in, Cal Clutterbuck, Casey Cizikas, and Matt Martin. That whole fourth line returns. Leo Komarov's still there for another year. Oliver Wahlstrom. Look for Wahlstrom to play a bigger role in this lineup this year. They've got to get him going and get him as being one of their top secondary scorers. And then Richard Panik. I don't know if Panik's going to be a regular in the lineup or if he's going to be kind of an extra forward for them. I think there's a good chance he's kind of an extra forward along with Komarov. And then I think Wahlstrom's going to be a regular. Parise coming in will be a regular. That's at least how I see it shaking out right now. On the defensive side of things, Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock returns as your top pair. Noah Dobson is going to play a big role this year. They need him to kind of really break out and become that first-round level defenseman that they drafted. Because losing Leddy is definitely a loss, particularly on the offensive side of things, and just getting production from your back end. Dobson is going to have to step into that role, and he's definitely going to be playing a top 4 role this year. So look for big things from Noah Dobson. Andy Green, the veteran, very solid since coming to New York. I feel like people don't realize how good he's been in an Islanders uniform since that trade from New Jersey. He's been very, very good for them in a defensive defenseman role. Not going to give you much for points, but just playing a really solid defensive game. Green has been awesome for them. Then you've got Scott Mayfield, Zdeno Chara. Obviously, this very defensive-minded guys, both of them. And then I have Paul Ledoux as the 7th defenseman, but there are a couple guys that could also take that role from him. We'll see if he starts in the NHL roster, if he starts in Bridgeport. We'll see. In goal, obviously, you've got Semyon Varlamov and Ilya Sorokin. Those, same goaltending tandem as last year, and very, very good goaltending tandem between the two of them. On the depth side of things, Ross Johnston. Now, Ross Johnston has been on the NHL roster for the past couple years, but with the additions of, with Parise coming in, with Palmieri coming in last year, with Panik coming in, I think Johnston's probably going to get waived and relegated down to the AHL, and he could be a call-up if you started having guys dropping out of the lineup, but I don't see him making the 13 or 14 forward roster out of camp. Because I mean, whose spot would he take? I mean, unless they waive Panik or if they waive Komarov or something like that, then Johnston could still be on the roster. But we'll see how it all works out. But I don't see a spot in this lineup for him with the amount of forwards that they already have. But he could definitely be a call-up later in the year if they need him. Otto Koivula re-signed with the team. Kiefer Bellows, I don't think has a contract yet, but he's an RFA. He's not going anywhere. So, those are a couple younger guys that could be call-ups from the AHL. And then they signed Andy Andreoff, who's kind of, always been that AHL, NHL kind of on that line. He's played a few years in the NHL, but he's played a lot more in the AHL. And he'd be a depth call-up, similar to Ross Johnston, I think, where if you need a fourth-line guy to bring some toughness into the lineup, then Andreoff's a guy that can do that. But he'll definitely be starting in the AHL. On the defensive side of things, I have Paul Ledoux as a seventh defenseman, but Thomas Hickey or Sebastian Aho could win that job and end up making the roster out of camp. It's kind of up for grabs between those three, Ledoux, Hickey, and Aho. It's just going to come down to how well they play in training camp and in the preseason, and who's going to get that job and who's going to end up down in the AHL. And I don't have a third goaltender listed here because I have absolutely no idea who the third goaltender would be for this team right now. Looking with who they have signed right now, I mean, they really better hope nothing happens to Varlamov or Sorokin, because down in the AHL, they have they don't have anything that is that can reasonably be expected to perform at the NHL level. I guess Appleby would be their third goaltender right now, but he has 3 career NHL games, all coming I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago, and he spent last year in the AHL, but the year before in the ECHL. And their other goaltender has mainly been an ECHL goaltender and hasn't even put up good numbers there. So they literally have nothing as far as goaltending is concerned beyond Varlamov and Sorokin. So they really, really need those two to stay healthy, because when they're as a tandem, they're a fantastic goaltending tandem, but they don't have any depth behind them. So if one of those guys goes down with an injury, they're in trouble. I feel like they're going to have to do something else. They got to add somebody into this organization that's an adequate third goaltender. I don't know who it would be right now off the top of my head, but I feel like they've got to add at least one more goaltender who you could at least call up to be a third goalie for this team, because right now there is no depth there whatsoever. But that's my projected roster for the New York Islanders. Obviously, we'll see how it all shakes out through training camp in the preseason, and come opening night, they'll have their full roster set and whatnot. But pretty deep team, obviously very good team. They've been in the Final Four the last 2 years for a reason. This is a very good team. They play a very structured game. They got great goaltending, extremely good team defense. And, they're not a super high-scoring team, but they've got guys that can put the puck in the net. I mean, Barzal, Lee, Nelson, Bailey, Bavillier, Palmieri, Pajot. These are all guys that can score and are going to be, offensive guys for this team. So I'm looking for another very, very strong year from New York. This team should be, again, a contender this year. They should be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and as long as they stay relatively healthy, nobody stays completely healthy, but as long as they stay relatively healthy and don't lose a goaltender for like half the year or something like that, there's no reason to think this team won't not only be a playoff team, but have the ability to go very deep into the playoffs once again. And we'll see if this is finally the year that they do it and they can make it to the finals and compete for a Stanley Cup. They've come so close the past 2 seasons, but just a little bit short, running into Tampa Bay both times. Maybe this is the year. We're going to find out. But I'm expecting another very strong season from the New York Islanders. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, our merch store, membership, and donation links are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.